Welcome back to the Propel Education Podcast, where we sit down with educators and leaders who are thoughtfully shaping school culture, leadership, and learning communities. Today, I'm joined by David Whitmire, a Christian school leader and superintendent of Pacific Point Christian School in Gilroy, California. David brings decades of experience in education, and his work is deeply rooted in faith, service, with a strong emphasis on building healthy school cultures that support students, families, and staff. So in today's conversation, we're going to explore what that means to lead with integrity and faith in your daily decision making and how you all as school leaders can balance your academic excellence with care, sustainability, and purpose. So we're going to get into it. David, thank you for being here today. So good to see you.
Thanks for inviting me. This is kind of new for me, so I'm enjoying it.
Well, my first question is I always like to ask guests, can you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe how you got into education? Has it continued to inspire you over decades and decades of work in different communities throughout your career? And yeah, I think that would be a great place to start.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the church, and I felt early on that I felt like that being a spiritual leader was something that God was calling me to do. And so even at a young age, I thought I was going to be a pastor. I thought that's what God wanted for me. And so I determined, I think I was 8 years old or something, I determined I was going to be a pastor.
Wow.
And during my time in college, I kind of had a change in heart and fell in love with my teaching classes. And the educational world then opened up to me in that respect. And I'm a firm believer that God, if you're seeking after him, he will guide your heart in your decision making. And so I felt like that was God just pushing me in that direction. Like, you're still going to serve me. I just want you in a school, not as a pastor. So that's how I got into education. And went to public school when I first started school, but I went to Christian school from fourth grade all the way through college, and it seemed very natural for me to go into Christian education, having been raised in that as well. So that's kind of how I got into it. Did I answer your question fully?
You did. Well,
Okay,
and
good.
what continues to keep you inspired to show up every day too is one of my and initial
Yeah.
questions as well.
Okay. Yeah, the inspiration there is that, and I think any teacher, whether they're in a private school, Christian school, whatever, would probably tell you that there's more to it than just being a job.
Hmm.
There is a feel when you're a teacher that you're doing something greater than yourself, and there's in the spiritual sense of the word, I call that a calling. And there's a calling then that I need to be doing this with my life, and it gives me purpose. So that's what keeps me showing up, even on a hard day.
Yeah, I appreciate that because it's so true. It's more than a job, and often teachers are very underpaid, and sometimes it can be a very thankless space that we're in. And we show up because we love the students, we love the staff, and we love community. So you've been in education a long time, as we talked about, and I really appreciate hearing about your history and how you grew up in Christian settings. And I would really like to know, can you talk a little bit about the leadership principles you bring into your school as a result of having had all of this history and background and foundational work that you've done throughout your career? How does that show up?
Well, I feel like that there's kind of, like you said, principles. There's principles in place that I've just kind of grown up with them ingrained in me. And part of that is that a leader is a servant, and he's a servant first. So in the Bible, it talks about how Jesus didn't come into this world to serve or to be served, but to serve.
Mhm.
And leaders aren't here to be served by everyone else around them. They're here to serve everyone. So a leadership role is really support role in helping all those in my organization succeed. So I
Mm.
feel like that's point number one. And then the integrity part of it is, my walk with God um, is integral to my personal life. And so I need to point to Christ
Mm.
through what I do. And I have the privilege of doing that because I work in a Christian organization.
Yeah.
So um, in Proverbs, it tells us that everything that you do should flow from your heart. So be careful
Mm.
to guard your heart and protect your heart.
Mm.
So
I love that.
and even though I'm talking from a Christian point of view, I think even teachers kind of operate on that they're teaching from the heart. Otherwise, they're probably not a good teacher.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you talking about being a servant leader because I think right now where we are in the world, like we need people to show up and be of service to each other and to lean in with hard work. Sometimes I think when we get standards that are coming down from the state Department of Education, and there's just a lot of things that we have to do as educators, it can get a little taxing to really show up authentically and create vulnerability to be in spaces with students and to just kind of acknowledge that maybe sometimes we just don't have the answers or we just don't know. And so when you were talking, I thought about, the saying, be a sage on the stage or a guide, be a guide by the side of students. And I really lean into that, being a guide, being a servant, being of service in the spaces that we're in. So yeah, I just really appreciated that. And I'm so glad you brought that up. So with your experience at Pacific Point Christian School, faith is a foundational space that you all live in every day. It's part of your ethos and how you all show up and support students. So can you talk about, how that shapes your decision making, your school culture, and the life of students and staff on campus, and how you continue to keep that centered and how you continue to ground yourselves in those, and again, the principles, given all that's happening in the world, which can be really sometimes really taxing and, really there's a lot going on. We're in a different season. And so, how are you all able to show up? How are you able to show up and support your teachers? It's
Yeah. So in the world, we experience a brokenness, and
mm,
that plays into our faith because we
mhm,
learn how to respond to that brokenness and show other show others God's love. So even though the world could be viewed as a dark and dim and bleak place, isn't it the responsibility of the teacher to show them the light in the world as well?
mhm. Yeah.
So we try to bring in the aspect of, if it's a current event that's coming onto our campus and pulling everyone down, we do our best to excuse me, address the world that we live in with the idea that God is still in control,
Mhm.
um, even through the hardships and the things that happen in this brokenness. We can still live fulfilled and um, uh, know that God has our best interests at heart. And we may not know, there's a familiar saying that we may not know what tomorrow holds, but we
Mhm.
know who holds tomorrow. And
Mm.
in that respect, it's living out our life is a faith walk, and
Yeah.
especially in this world. And it's important to teach young people that um, God is in control even now. We don't know the heart, that we don't know the mind of God. We never will. And there's a reason we're going through the things we're going through. Trust that He's got us, you
Yeah.
know. So,
I love that. I think I love the intentionality about what you said, and sometimes it calls us to slow down a little bit because I think that we're all moving really fast and we've all got things to attend to, and I think intentionally setting the space to, like you said, believe in your faith, believe in God and believe in the fact that, there is a purpose for how we're showing up and the things that are happening in our environment, in our world, in our society today. And that there is something larger than us, right, happening where we can believe in that direction and really have faith in the outcome and knowing that we're working towards something that will hopefully, like you said, provide love, provide us with a foundation to show up and support each other and be kind to each other. Because I feel like so much of what is being seen, the optics of, you turn on the news and like, it's doom and gloom. And it's really like calling us into like finding our faith. Like, do we want to be on the side of light, right? And hope, or do we want to be on the side of, like you said, dim and sadness? And I think there is a decision to be made about where you want to be. And I often say in my work, being a community organizer who works in a school district, it takes so much more energy to be in a bad space than it does to be light and hope for people. Because I feel like people are attracted to that. They want to be connected to people who have faith, who have hope. And so that's just so much of the work I think that you're bringing to the students and the staff in your school. And so much more of what we need in our spaces is to speak to the faith, right? And to really
Yeah.
call that into the spaces we're in.
One of
So,
these,
oh,
before
yes,
you
go
go
ahead.
on, one of the points I want to bring up too is that, just like what you're saying, um, we, um, we can't operate from a position of fear and
Hmm.
be afraid of the world around us and the things that are coming out of this horrible, you know, whatever it is that's attacking us now. You know,
Yeah.
we there's
Yes.
a Bible verse that even talks about that. It says that God hasn't given us fear, the spirit of fear. He's given us power, love, and a sound mind. And
Mm.
if we stop and think about that, I love how you said sometimes we need to just stop and take a breath,
Hmm.
stop and think about that intentionality of, wait a minute, you know, uh, is this a sound decision? Is this a
Yeah.
sound way? Are we just,
Yeah.
doing things out of fear? We're
Hmm.
not called to do things out of fear. We have God's love on our side, God's power on our side, and that's how we should operate and make our decisions. So
Yeah.
anyway, I wanted to throw that in there.
I love that. So I guess that leads to the next question. So we're talking about things that are coming up in spaces, and so much of it is driven by, I say, schools are microcosms of smaller microcosms of what happens in the larger societies at our society right now, right? And we're in a season where there is a lot of energy and movement and what could be conceived as chaos and struggle for people. And so I guess my question is, how do you show up for the kids and the students and the families that are in your community as we navigate these challenging times? And how do you sort of model that leader behavior, and how do you protect the boundaries of your staff? Because, like, again, the things outside do find their way into the classrooms. And how are teachers navigating some of these conversations with students? And how are you helping them lead those conversations, as a superintendent for your school?
Yeah. So I feel like that it's all about um, the practice of what we're incorporating into our school culture now and like walking that out
Mhm.
rather than being reactive to everything that comes our way, to
Mhm.
continue that purpose, and sometimes it does take stopping and reminding our staff of like, um, remember, this is the purpose of what we're doing, and this is the purpose of our school. This is why we're even here. Those kinds of things. Um, and when we're operating our school um, from a point of this is our school purpose, like our mission,
Mhm.
then our operations, if we're thinking about both of those things at the same time, they're only going to help each other.
Mhm.
So I think I'm headed on the right direction of where you were asking, but I just think we need to continually visit the mission statement and make sure that operationally, even if weird things are coming into our view as a school, um,
Yes.
we need to make sure that we're supporting the staff by reminding them of why we're even here. Like
Yeah.
this is step one. Like, I teach kind of that kind of thing when I hire someone new, and it's kind of done in the onboarding process, even of like, this is our mission, this is our
hmm
purpose,
hmm
and we're going to try to make sure that those kinds of decisions, any kind of decision we make along the way, is pointing back to those things,
Yeah.
the mission and purpose of the school.
Yeah, I think having those values is sort of a beacon for people, super important, especially in times of struggle, where you often do need to refer back to like, what is our vision? Because I think sometimes it can feel hopeless, right? There can be so many things inundating us. Like I said, you turn on the news and there's stuff there. You're in the community and, kids are coming in with stories, and there's just sometimes so much coming at us. And being in a classroom and being a teacher and being able to reach students and recognize the trauma sometimes they bring into the classroom, and being able to be thoughtful enough to connect with them and socially and emotionally and be the caring adult in the school or in the classroom that they can come to have a conversation is so much about how we build, I think, a healthy school culture is having one caring adult, having a culture of climate and of belonging, where students feel safe, seen, and connected to somebody. So, you've shared, your mission, your focus, during these times is to drive, your staff back to your mission. And so what kind of cultural practices have you seen make the biggest difference in building the trust and the sustainability within your school community? Are there things that, as a new administrator in your school, you're coming in, with a lot of like experience and history working in different settings, and how have you been able to bring that in and kind of anchor it for the staff?
Yeah, I think mostly, looking back over all different kinds of schools that I've been involved with, number one is communication, first and foremost. We're here not to lord over families, we're here to partner with parents in the rearing and education of their children. I think all schools would agree that we're doing more than just education during those 8 hours they're with the kids are with, or 6 hours, how many ever hours your school works. And it's like, we gotta remember that there's more than just textbook learning going on.
Yes.
We model behaviors, and in a Christian setting, then we're going to model spiritual behaviors as well, and um, reliance on God, a trust in Him, and making sure that to promote that culture, each teacher is doing that in their classes, and
hmm
that's done through observation, through um, it can be done even through just little conversations that you're having with students, or conversations between teacher to teacher or teacher to parent. And um, getting back to when I first said communication is key, um, it's I think it's probably wise to say that communication is one of the most difficult things in any company, not just schools, but making sure that your communication is clear and
hmm
concise, and um, you don't ever want to have a parent feel like they've been surprised by something, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so making sure that communication is going out, and if a parent does present you with, wait, what's going on? How? And you can then say, well, we sent it to you this way, and we talked about it this way. I'm sorry you missed it. Those kinds of things. Be gentle in the education of the parents, even.
Yeah, I love that. So can I dig in a little bit there, because parent engagement is actually my background, and I really love that you kind of naturally gravitated towards the communication with parents. And oftentimes I feel like in spaces that I've been in, mostly traditional school spaces, parents are sort of an afterthought for staff. Like they'll introduce a new initiative, or there will be a narrative I've heard in schools, specifically the schools I've worked with are high demographic kids of color, that because parents aren't coming to site councils or school conferences or things like that, that they don't care about their kids. And I think that that can sometimes be a really dangerous narrative. And I just feel like I've tried to interrupt it with staff and tried to acknowledge both the challenges of getting parents of color to spaces where they feel comfortable connecting with teachers and staff. One, because it could be it could be the timing of the meeting, it could be a language barrier, it could be transportation, it could be a whole host of things. Because I think a lot of this relies on relationship building and knowing who your parents are, and it really takes time to build those relationships and deepen those connections for people to feel comfortable enough to tell you their business. To be honest, right? And so I think when we don't do that, kids lose out, the students we serve lose out. So I think that communication piece is really important to nurture that and to not give up. To like, even if a parent doesn't respond to an email, keep emailing. Even if a parent came to you and said, Superintendent, I didn't get that message, you're like, okay, we're going to figure it out. Maybe your email's wrong, or maybe we'll send it home in print and a flyer. I mean, maybe we'll just go old school with how we get you the information, you know? I mean, hey, I mean,
Yes.
but I just really appreciate you saying that, because I think it's really important to think about the different ways we communicate with parents and not blame anybody, but be more solution oriented.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I tell new teachers all the time is that they're going to naturally want to shy away from the parents, and they
Mm-mm.
need to, as a new teacher, you need to realize that we are partnering with the parents.
Yeah.
We are not standing in place of. We are partnering, and they need to get those parents on their side
Yeah.
and communicate often and
Yeah.
early.
Yeah, yeah, often and early. Yeah. And I
Yes.
think that's a good preventative measure for you know, any missteps that might happen. And I think if you have that relationship, when a misstep happens, parents are more likely to lean in and say, oh, okay, you know, I totally hear you. I totally acknowledge that that was a mistake. And, oftentimes what I found also in community work is we would call parents in to ask them questions during a bond campaign or a focus group or a town hall for something we needed information for. But then we didn't close the loop about how we utilize the information, or we didn't tell them, hey, the bond passed. Obviously, they would know that, but just closing the loop around the communications is really important with parents so that they know, like, oh, the superintendent took my feedback super seriously, or Miss McDowell actually cared about what I said, and this is the way we implemented what you shared. So I just really appreciate you leaning into that. So, you've described the purpose of education and how it is situated in your particular setting. And as you're developing staff and, members of society, right? The next generation of scholars, they're coming up through your school. How does the vision and the expectation for students show up for you? Like, what are some of the things that you all are sharing with students to really lift them up? The expectations you have in your school setting might be different than a traditional school setting. So what does that look like for you all?
So I would say, like, lifting up our students would be, like the positive aspects of building that relationship, like you were talking about. We don't, we're, the teachers aren't here to just interact with the curriculum. They're here to,
Mm,
a student learns better when they have a good relationship with their student, with their teacher. And so the teachers, um, it, as long as they realize that,
yeah,
they don't have to be perfect
yeah,
um, to be able to develop a relationship, because relationships are messy, you
yeah,
know, and depending on your district and who you've been given as your kids, exactly the way you said it, it's about that relationship sometimes first
yeah,
before a student can jump into learning. There are certain learning types that won't learn from you
yeah,
unless they know you.
yeah,
That's a whole, we could talk about learning types forever, but um, I think it's important for all kids to know that they're loved and cared for, and that they're in a safe space. And those are the things that drive decision making on the campuses. Are they, you know, are we, yes, we're a school, but we at Pacific Point, we are a Christian school. So what are we doing to be Christian first and then a school? What are we doing to promote the atmosphere? Because
Yeah.
that's what the parents are buying.
Yeah.
If they just want private school, they can go down the street.
Yeah.
They're buying into this idea of we're coming alongside you, and you have a spiritual foundation in your home. We want
Hmm.
to build on that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So that's how we do it.
So you talked a little bit about operations earlier and kind of the mission and ensuring that those things are aligned. And you just spoke to like if they wanted something else, they would go somewhere else. So there's something there. Obviously, there's the ethos, there's the mission, there's faith, there's God that's centered and grounded in the work that you all do. So
Mhm.
I guess my question is, how do you sort of balance that with the mission and values? I mean, you're sitting amongst other schools that do things differently, right? And there's something about what you're offering parents are really leaning into. So how do you sort of balance the operations, the mission, and the expectation of parents? It's like a lot to like balance. So how do you do that? As a superintendent, sometimes that can be a heavy lift.
Yeah, but it all honestly it all starts in marketing. It starts
Yeah.
there in how
Mm,
we're presenting ourselves to the community.
mm,
Um, because if the wrong person is targeted, wrong, quote unquote, wrong, we are not for everyone.
yeah.
We are a specific target audience, and um, it starts with the marketing of what our digital footprint is like in the community, and
Yeah.
then it goes all like the first exposure to our school from the tour on. We're talking about what we're all about,
Yeah.
from the time that parents show up for the tour.
Okay.
And we have a requirement, like let's say the child is from spends time in both homes and they're from a split home.
Hmm.
We require both parents to come to that tour, and it starts right away with,
Yeah.
hey, this is what we're all about. um, does this fit with what you're all about?
Yeah, yeah, to make sure that there's some synergy there so that there's a match. Yeah. And holding
Yeah.
integrity, because that's about integrity, like an integrity fit, right? About like you want
Yes,
your child to go here, but we also want to make sure that it's a right fit for your family,
exactly.
regardless if you're nuclear together or co-parenting in a space. Um,
Yep.
so I love everything you said. And I have what I call the final bell question for leaders in schools, Christian leaders and leaders in general. I like to leave people with a little bit of something to, think about as we think about the work that we do. And if you could share something, a takeaway for leaders listening to our conversation today and wanted to take action, doing something feasible, meaningful, and sustainable in their practice, what would you advise them to do to strengthen their school community, and the culture of their school based on everything that you shared today, which has been fantastic?
Well, thank you. Okay, so I will be speaking to the Christian community, but I honestly feel like anyone that hears this takeaway could get something from it, even though it may be faith based. You should
Mm,
be able to carry something away. And that's that, you know, we talked a lot, especially at the beginning of this interview, about the outside coming in. The things that are going on in the world can be very bleak and dreary. Um, if this is what's weighing you down, or as if this is a leader that I'm talking to, and the aspect of decision making is weighing you down, don't give the negativity space in your
mm,
mind,
yeah,
because when you give it space, you're giving it power.
yeah,
And going back to that one Bible verse that I lean on is, God didn't give us that operational system. He's given us power to have power, love, and a sound mind. I love that those three were bound together in that's the way we should be thinking. So determine that someone greater than you
Mhm.
in my world, it's God. God is in control.
Yeah.
Let him be in control.
Yes.
Tomorrow, this problem, whatever it is that's weighing you down, is still going to be there. Rest
Mhm.
in him and his plan that he's watching out for you even now.
Mhm.
That's what I would do, and let God lead. Now that doesn't mean we just sit back and do nothing and say, okay, God, you're in control. We have to do our due diligence, meaning, like, okay, we've got this problem in front of us, let's work it. But you have to realize that there's someone in control over you
Mhm.
and above you that's going to give you guidance through the working of it. Like, do your due diligence. You don't just sit back and say, okay, God, take care of it.
Yeah.
He's going to guide you if you're trusting him to do that. So that's my takeaway. Do your due diligence, but then let him guide you through it.
I think that's beautifully said. I appreciate everything that you said, all that you shared. I think it was really great to lean into a conversation in a different way around the work that you're doing in your school and in your community. So I want to thank you for being here today and joining us,
Thank you.
David. You're fantastic. And to the listeners, realize and just sit with what you heard today. Progress in education isn't about doing more, it's about deepening what matters most. And if you found today's conversation valuable, subscribe to the podcast, Propel Education Podcast, to stay up to date on future episodes. And until next time, keep leading with purpose and propelling education forward. See
Thank
you.
you.
Thank